Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another episode of Mario Radium Talks Wrestling. A little bit more into this one because it's later in the day and not at work today because I've been relieved, haven't heard anything about my other spot yet. So, might as well do this. Anyway, if you haven't seen, I did an episode regarding TLC and my thoughts on it, but not without getting into it much. I really did enjoy the pay-per-view. I mean, a couple matches felt like filler, but overall I thought it was pretty good, and the ending did make me actually want to watch Raw this week. Now, before I get into that, there was actually one moment on the pay-per-view I forgot to mention. It was during the New Day's promo before their match, and that was they did a little pose saying that they deserve to be on the next box of Wheaties. And it was a funny pose made more so by B. Langston's expression with his mouth open. And the reason I mention it is because apparently in the Solid Monster group someone actually did Photoshop it. I gotta try to find it so I can put it in here. If not, try to find it yourself because it was funny as heck. It made my day when I saw that. This week's episode of Raw I actually thought was pretty decent. Now it could be a combination of the fact that I haven't watched Raw in a while and I've been keeping up with the results because of podcasts like the Solid Monster and others. And also the fact that the booking for certain parts were pretty good, but I enjoyed it. Now the show opened up with Stephanie McMahon coming out and doing a promo about what Roman Reigns had done the night before to her husband, and she did a pretty good job starting out, of course, heel from the beginning, but trying to be sympathetic at the beginning. I'm just like all of you. You take away the money and the education, and I'm just like all you women. And then she went the route, women in business are always seen as cutthroat and cold. Well, I can't speak about other women and normal ones, but that's not because you're a woman in the workplace, it's because you are cutthroat and cold. But it still was actually pretty good to get some heel heat. Then she called Roman Reigns out. He came out, and I'll say the promo he did, it actually fit his character a lot more than a lot of the other stuff they've had him say this year, especially the Magic Bean crap at the beginning of the year. If there's any negative thing about it is that he did not sound 100% invested into it, or didn't come off as strongly as he should, but it's probably because they're still scripting it a little bit for him, even though this is more like what he should be saying. But you could tell from how he spoke that this is what he's more comfortable with. And if they keep pushing him like this, he'll find that character and it'll sound 100% natural within no time. But he came off a lot better here. And I did like he called the McMahon family and Triple H all disgraces, and it really pissed off Stephanie. And she reacted by slapping the crap out of him. And I just love Roman's reactions after each slap, just smiling at her like, is that all you got? And then she kept slapping him. She told him that she's not going to fire him because Triple H asked her not to, but that someone else might, and that person is Vincent Kennedy McMahon. Not really that surprised based on how the ratings have been going that Vince would be on the show. He turned up later. Since I watched it later, I couldn't check what hour it was, but he showed up and interrupted a match between Bo Dallas and R-Truth that was so-so, but it was basically just filler till Vince came out, and he basically was making Roman sweat, and then he finally called him out and said he wanted an apology out of him. Roman, of course, gave him no apology, and he's like, I want you to get down on your knees and apologize. And in the old days, I would beat an apology out of you. And I just love Roman's reaction to that. He's all like, yeah, right. Then Triple H. Then Vince takes off his jacket. Looks like he's going to start it when out comes Sheamus. And of course he says to Vince he wants the honor of beating up Roman Reigns for him, on the honor of both being Irishmen, which I did like that they actually did make that Irish connection there. The fans started doing the "You look stupid" chant, and I do actually like the response that Sheamus gave to this. I look stupid. Well, all of you paid to see me tonight, so what does that all make you? That was actually a pretty good comeback. I have a feeling that was ad-libbed. Just the way that it just came out of nowhere with the flow of this segment. That's what it felt like. And of course, Sheamus said that he was so confident he would beat Roman Reigns, he wouldn't mind putting the WWE title on the line. And of course, during this whole thing, they referenced the 5 minutes 15 seconds thing again, pointing at the Sheamus 515 shirt. And at this point, it cut back to Roman Reigns, and the look on Reigns' face looks like he's thinking, "Oh my God, are they still trying to make this a thing?" Or at least that's what I got out of it. I don't know if they intentionally cut back to that look or not, but I think it was fun. At first, Vince does the whole, you guys want to see a match? You guys fall for that every time. But then he decides to let Roman Reigns have the match after Roman Reigns calls him out on it. Calls him old. Says time is passing him by, which we all know is a veiled thing about him being out of touch, or at least that's how I'm viewing it. And basically brought up the whole grapefruit thing and saying he must now have shriveled raisins, which I know this is kind of a play off the whole thing he did last week, but at least in this context it made more sense since Vince is always talking about his grapefruits, and it's not like he's yelling tater tots now. And Vince just looked at him and was like, "You son of a bitch! You have your match." But the condition was that if Roman Reigns lost, he is fired. And I'll say with this, it was good to hear Vince go, "You're fired!" again, because it's been so long since he said it, so it's good to see. And of course, obviously, they weren't going to go through with this, because when was the last time they actually did a "you're fired" stipulation and actually held to it? Or at least in storyline for a while. Last one I could think of off the top of my head was Stone Cold. In between the opening segment and then the segment that led into Vince coming out, we had a Dean Ambrose versus Dolph Ziggler match, and for what it actually was a pretty good match. Good showing for the new Intercontinental Champion. Good working with Ziggler. There was one moment in the match that stood out for me, and that was when they each got out of each other's finishers. Ziggler went for a super kick, Ambrose reversed it and then went for dirty deeds. Ziggler got out, and then they both went to the opposite sides of the ring. Were looking at each other like, like, "Yeah, I almost had you. Well, I almost had you too, man." And the fans were clapping. And this led right into a commercial break, which I'm probably not alone in thinking that it is very irksome when they always are doing these commercial breaks right in the middle of a match. I know they have 3 hours to kill, but you could just do a longer break after the match is over. Don't do it in the middle of them all the time. It makes them seem annoying. Every once in a while is fine, but all the time, irksome. With that aside, doing it at this moment I felt was kind of appropriate. If you're going to do one, that is. It also doesn't help that later on in the show they did another one, but like I said, irksome. The match ended in a disqualification when Kevin Owens came out and threw Ziggler out of the ring and then went after Ambrose. And then after the match, Owens said that he's gonna drive Ambrose more insane, put him in an asylum, and then get back his Intercontinental title. I'm guessing that's just him using, creative language, because I don't think he really wants to drive Ambrose more insane. But if that's the storyline they're going for, it's like, how can you drive Ambrose even more insane than his character already is? Unless you actually get him in an asylum, but we'll just see. But Owens, coming out to interfere in the match made sense. I mean, with how his character is, it would make sense that he'd be pissed off the night after he loses the title. And the fans were into it when he came out, which just leads into another thing I have to address right here. Vince Russo, former creative person for WWE, WCW, and TNA, apparently is not a fan of Kevin Owens. He basically said about it in his one little show thing, and then he talked about it a little bit when he was on JR's podcast this week, which I fast forwarded through a lot of that part because I do not agree with it. Well, I will agree that he does have the right to say what his opinion is, but I just do not get how he does not like Owens from this point of view, and that is he does not think he'll be a draw, and he does not think that he looks like a superstar. Here's the thing, not every superstar should look like the template of a superstar, because if everyone looks the exact same, no one stands out. You need big guys, you need small guys, you need skinny guys, you need fat guys. And also the whole thing about him not looking like a superstar so he won't get over, that is bullshit. Daniel Bryan doesn't look like a normal superstar. Look how over he was. I say was because we don't know if he's coming back. Look how over Mick Foley was at the peak of his career. And look at him. He does not look like your normal superstar. And you can even argue that Bret Hart does not look like your normal superstar, at least in the WWE era that he was in. And look how over he was. Even Shawn Michaels did not look like the average superstar. I mean, both him and Bret, were built, but they weren't like gigantic, larger than life. So don't tell me that he won't get over just because he does not look like a superstar. He is over. It's because he knows how to play his character well, and part of it, his look kind of adds to it because he stands out. And also for the whole thing about him getting over, the fans are reacting, so he's over in that way. And as for him being a draw, I have to look up the numbers specifically, but from what I've been hearing, he has been selling a lot of merchandise, so he is right now a mid-card draw. Whether or not that draw will continue once he actually does get a main event push on the main roster is yet to be seen, but with how things are, I wouldn't put it past him. So I think it's just more of Russo talking out of his ass. Because remember, this is the same guy who had a hand in killing WCW. I say a hand because I don't give him sole credit. That's the one thing about his whole counter argument I will give him credit for, is that he was not the sole reason WCW died. It was him, and then, Time Warner trying to be too anal about it, and then wanting to distance himself from wrestling, and then all the creative control contracts and all that stuff. But he had a hand in it because of his booking, because he did not have a filter. And then, of course, the whole thing with him being one of the deaths of TNA right now because of him, and because he's the part of the reason they got kicked off of Spike TV. Then we had a return match from last night. We had Team ECW versus the Wyatts in an Extreme Rules match. And for an Extreme Rules match in the PG era, it was the best that you can be expected of it. There were a lot of weapons being used. There were some table spots. And the fans were really into it. They didn't try to tease a flaming table spot again, which I think it would have been nice if they'd done that and actually set the table on fire, but then just have one of the ECW guys go through it, since they would know how to take it. But I can understand why they didn't want to tease that again. I think they could get away with that more on pay-per-view than on TV. And once again, the Wyatts won, as they should have. And it was a decent match for what it was. This was the main return match, since it was team versus team. We had a semi-return match as well. We had Ryback and Jack Swagger versus Alberto Del Rio and Rusev with Lana in their corner. And the League of Nations won, which, doesn't surprise me. When I first saw this, I thought, oh great, more 50-50 booking. Are they going to have the faces win since they both lost their individual matches last night? No, the heels went over. Makes me wonder if they just did this to add more to the main event match later, since they did have interference from them, or if they're actually going to try to make the League of Nations semi-serious until they break up. We'll just see. I just wonder if they're going to add some dissension when Sheamus doesn't win back the WWE title and Alberto still has his. But who knows? They never know. Never know with WWE. They might put the title back on Sheamus and have him lose it again to help Reigns get over more. But if I was them, I would keep the title on Reigns to at least WrestleMania if you're going to take it off him again, or at least keep it on him until maybe SummerSlam. But that would be a good idea, depending on the opponent, that is. Then we had a segment with the New Day coming out, and they were actually serious at the beginning for once, and they called out their opponents from last night, complimented them and said, we have taken the tag team division to the next level, which for how the division is now, I will agree. It is probably the best it's been in a while. And then, of course, after the tag teams leave, they start doing their goofy shit again. And, of course, I do like that and that the faces at one point did call out the fact that they only retained the titles because the one who wasn't even in the match interfered by throwing his trombone, and may apologize before they got all goofy again. And I do like that some of them actually mentioned they have children at home that watch the products. That was a nice little dose of reality. I mean, this is supposed to be the quote-unquote reality era. The Divas match, I skipped that because, as I've said before, the Divas storylines aren't really interesting me right now. I fast-forwarded through it. Maybe I'll go back later and watch it and see who won, but I just skipped it in case anyone was wondering. The main event, Roman Reigns versus Sheamus for the WWE title. Now, it's hard, from an in-ring standpoint, I say it might have been better than their match the night before. Obviously, it's not as extreme because it was a normal match, but for a main event on Raw for the title, I thought it was pretty good. And Vince was at ringside, so like you would expect, he did have a part to play in the finish. When it looked like Reigns was about to win, he pulled the referee out, did his usual heel stuff. Then at one point he distracted the referee when the referee did not count 3 because Reigns kicked out, looking like he's going to do that. That's when the League of Nations interfered. Then we get another little moment where Reigns kicks out, and then Superman punches Vince at one point, which I thought was good, and then Vince sold it good. Vince sold it like he was dead, just laying there like he'd been crucified or something, which I got a chuckle out of me when we showed the camera. Now, if there's any problem with this, is that it made Sheamus's finishers look weak while making Reigns' look strong, which, since he's the face and Sheamus is the heel, and he might just end up being a transitional champion or semi-transitional champion since he won it from Reigns to begin with. It's hard to tell if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a little irksome thing. If anything, I think that Sheamus should not have hit a bro kick at all. Protect that finisher, or like have Reigns either dodge it and then do the spear, or just have him do a spear out of nowhere the first time he went for a bro kick. But that's just me, just looking at it thinking, yeah, they could have done that a little bit better. But I am glad that they made the spear look strong, and Vince getting the Superman punch and selling it like that did make the Superman punch look a little strong. But that is the finisher I think they need to build up again, because if I'm remembering right, I think hardly anyone has ever kicked out of the spear the last year, while the Superman punch, they've been hit with it multiple times. Someone like Lesnar getting hit with multiple ones I can understand, but like people like Sheamus, maybe one they should not kick out of, except for maybe interference or not hitting it all, or or Reigns not being able to follow up with it with a pin properly or something. But I think they need to build that finisher up more. Now, despite these little things, like I said, I thought it was a pretty good Raw main event for the title, and they put the title on Reigns. Roman now reigns. The Roman Empire has begun, it seems, and we now have two former members of the Shield holding 2 of the top titles. The top title and then one of the mid-card titles. Someone in the Soul Monster group put this Photoshop thing. It's almost like a second run of Diesel and Shawn Michaels in a way, because you got the bigger guy holding the world title and the smaller guy who's his friend holding the mid-card title. Of course, with Diesel and Shawn, the titles meant more, but hopefully the titles will start actually meaning more now. Like I've said before, this was a pretty good episode of Monday Night Raw. But whether or not that will continue in the next few weeks, we'll see. It does show when they actually put their mind to it, they actually can book a proper show, even though you can kind of say that this was kind of a hotshot show in a way. And now we come to NXT TakeOver London, NXT's first show from outside the US. And of course it's the final of their UK tour. Now, overall I say I enjoyed this show. And I only had like 2 streaming issues, although I didn't get around to watching it until like a couple days after, and I watched it in 2 parts. Could have finished it last night, but wanted to get to bed and then wake up early and finish it. And funny enough, both streaming issues were this morning. First, it did the usual thing where sometimes it will skip back and then forward again, but instead of skipping back in the same match, it skipped back to a previous match, so I had to stop the whole thing and then resume. And it went back to where it was supposed to be. And the second one was a very weird one, and something weird about having to log back into my PlayStation Network thing, and then it restarted the whole event, so I had to fast forward through. That one, it's hard to tell if that was the network or a miscommunication between my PlayStation and the network, but it was a little bit of an inconvenience. Didn't stop me from enjoying the main event though. The attendance for this show was over 10,000, which I could be wrong, but I think that might be the largest audience for an NXT streamed event. Like I said, it could be wrong. Anyway, the matches on the card were pretty good, and I thought they were placed at good spots. The opener was Asuka defeating Emma in a pretty good match. It was competitive. I think a lot more than Asuka's last match that I saw on one of the big NXT shows. And it's been a while since I've seen Emma, and she was actually pretty competitive in this match. I think this is the best I've seen Emma, because I haven't really watched a lot of her NXT work, and I mainly know her from her being on Raw a little bit. But her against Asuka was pretty good, and This, sadly, is how you do a women's match, but it just shows NXT knows how to handle the women more than the main roster does, at least right now. I mean, the most compelling the main roster has their women right now is with Charlotte and them, but even then, it's pales in comparison to this. And the audience was into this match. And Asuka came out on top. It looked for a little bit like she might lose, but I had a feeling the whole time she was going to win, so Asuka wins. Then we had Wilder and Dawson retaining their titles against Enzo and Kaz, which surprised me a little bit. I thought Enzo and Kaz were finally going to go over, but they didn't. And the whole match was pretty good, and by the end it looked like Enzo and Kaz were going to win, but then, you know, the whole thing with them losing, with how it came off, it's like, okay. But it makes me wonder, what are they going to do with Enzo and Kaz now? Are they going to continue to tease them having the NXT titles until they finally give it to them? Or are they just going to have them develop their characters a bit more and then bring them up to the main roster? Because I don't think I'm alone in thinking that them not having the NXT tag team titles by now is a small travesty, especially with how they built this one up and with that package they played before. You would think with that type of video package they would put the titles on them, but no. Didn't take away from how entertaining the match was, though. Was a couple seconds longer than the opener, but still good. Then we got Baron Corbin and Apollo Crews, which this was also a good match for what it was. Corbin went over, and I like at one point when he has Apollo on the outside, he goes by the ropes and he's like, "You should have stayed in Ring of Honor." That was a good little moment. It was kind of spoiled for me, though, briefly with one of the social media things, but, you know, luckily the finish wasn't. And of course, you know, another pretty good one. This was the last match I watched last night, so these first three matches, forgive me if I'm skimming over like a lot of good moments in the match. With the Asuka one, she did do her hip move at least 3 times, and each time it got a good reaction. From the Enzo and Cass tag team title match, there was actually a good moment where the referee stopped counting because he had actually seen the tag, and the people on the mat who were illegal in the match did not notice it, so that was a good call on the ref's part in the storyline. How they build up the Baron and Apollo Crews match was pretty good, showing all the stuff going back to when Baron cost Apollo Crews his NXT title shot. It's a good way to get into a match. Then we got to the women's title match, which I thought was a good pre-main event match, and Bayley retained her title against Nia Jax, which, how this whole match went, it kind of looked like they were going to put the title on Nia, but then it also built into Bayley being the underdog, especially against someone like Nia Jax. And there was a good portion of the match where Nia was dominating Bayley. And then, of course, at one point she did 3 leg drops, and it was like at that point I was, you know, my inner Jim Ross commentary was going off, you know, enough's enough, somebody stop the damn match. That whole thing, with Bayley kicked out. And then, with her underdog thing, she came back and put Nia in a guillotine hold, and she had to do it a couple times, but she finally got it to the point where Nia went down and eventually tapped. And I liked that before it, the audience was getting right into it. They were going tap, 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 tap. And I was thinking, is she tappable? And she tapped. So Bayley retains her title via submission, which I thought was a good win, especially for someone like Nia. She definitely comes across as someone who Bayley would probably have to defeat more by submission than by pinfall. Makes me wonder how they're going to follow this up. Is you-know-who going to get back and do it, or is she going to replace someone? And I like that backstage before the match, when Nia was talking with one of the backstage announcers, I liked that they did a little hint that they might do a Nia Jax versus Asuka match somewhere down the road, which I thought that'd be interesting, especially with the smile Asuka gave Nia. It's like Asuka's like, yeah, I want a piece of you. That'd be interesting. That'd probably be Asuka's biggest challenge to date, and I could see after beating Nia, she would get a shot at Bayley if the moon and stars are aligned perfectly. Now, when it comes to Nia, I know she's not really the best in-ring worker in the women's division, but, you know, for, you know, being the big, you know, brawler type lady, I thought she was pretty good in this match, and she complimented Bayley a little bit, especially with the whole underdog story they were going with. Whether or not she'll do that with other women's wrestlers, I don't know, because I haven't really watched a lot of Nia's other matches. I just heard they're not as good as, you know, they should be, but, you know, you need all types of workers in a division for it to look a little bit better, especially with you have someone that looks a little bit, or a little bit, a lot different than the other ones, and Nia's size actually does make her stand out a little bit. The only other one that really makes stands out like that would be Kong, but I digress. Then we got to the main event, Finn Balor defending his NXT Championship against Samoa Joe. From the start, the fans are really into this, and I did like how they gave Finn, as Demon Finn, a Jack the Ripper-esque entrance, you know, starting from the whole screaming and walking down the street thing to him coming out in the trench coat and the hat. That was really cool. Made his entrance stand out a little bit, especially since he was Demon Finn tonight. And the match went almost 20 minutes, and it was pretty good. The fans were into it from the start, especially with them at the beginning chanting for both people. Showed that even though Samoa Joe is a heel, that they do still respect him. And with how he turned heel because he wasn't given the match that Finn promised him, you can understand why he would be frustrated and then, of course, do all the stuff he did. And like he even mentioned in the whole promo thing that, you know, he did a terrible thing, but, you know, he had to do it in order to get what he wanted, and here it goes. And the match, you know, when it's a match which you would expect from these two back and forth, and, you know, it's like it could be anyone's game, but in the end, Finn pushed Joe down onto the ground after reversing what looked like was going to be a super muscle buster, then hit him with his finisher and pinned him. And Finn is still the champion. Now, as you guys know, when I did my predictions, I thought they were going to put the title on Joe. But with how they've been building this up, I also said that Finn winning would also make sense, and it wouldn't be something that annoys me. And I have to say, Finn winning, I like it. I actually do like that they have a face who, after getting beat up a lot by the heel in the weeks leading to the match, actually comes out on top. On the main roster, I don't know if they would actually have done that. They might have if it was Roman Reigns or someone else, but with Finn retaining, I do like it. I do like also that he was put in Samoa Joe's finisher a lot during the match, and there was one part where Samoa put it in that I loved, and that's when Finn was on the outside of the ring ropes and Joe put it in, and it was like, okay, is he just doing this to hurt him, and then he's gonna be forced to break it because he's at the ropes? But no, he just basically pulls Finn over the ropes and like takes him to the center and does it. Now that was cool. That was smart thinking too. Even though I just watched the match, you know, I'm probably gonna have to watch it again, but definitely, like I said, a match I'll watch again. And it was a pretty good main event to cap off this show. And I have to say, I probably enjoyed this pay-per-view a lot more than TLC, but like I'll have to watch it again from beginning to end in one go. And probably the next time I talk about NXT, I'll probably have watched it from beginning to end, so I'll let you guys know how I feel about it again. But like I said, pretty good. Going by the critics, apparently the lowest rated match was Apollo Crews versus Baron Corbin at a 2.5 out of 5 stars. And that's maybe about right. They gave this match a 4 out of 5, which that's about right, which I'd say the same rating for Emma and Asuka. If you are a fan of NXT and you haven't watched the show, I'd say get off your butt and go and watch it.